Evan Holt once worked as an engineer back on Earth. He was known for his skill in building machines that could repair themselves, a gift that many admired. But when the galactic trade wars started, everything changed. Earth lost its control over technology, and humans became a weak and scattered race. Evan was one of the unlucky ones captured by alien traders and sold into slavery on a faraway planet called Rithora. Rithora was not a place of kindness. It was a world of steel, heat, and endless labor. The sky was always orange, and the air smelled like burning metal. Humans were treated as nothing more than tools to fix broken engines or clean polluted areas. Evan worked long hours repairing mining robots under harsh overseers who never spoke a gentle word. His hands were always cut and burned, but he kept silent. Inside, he carried a quiet dream, to one day see a real sky again, not the orange clouds filled with smoke. One day, after many months, a transport ship arrived at the camp. Evan and a few others were ordered to board it. They were told they were being sent to another work zone. The guards had weapons, and no one dared to ask questions. The ship was small, packed with tired humans, and the engines made a strange humming sound. Evan sat near the window, staring out at the endless dunes of Rithora's desert. He thought about Earth, about green grass, rivers, and the sound of birds. It had been years since he had seen any of those things, but destiny had other plans for him. Halfway through the journey, a huge sandstorm rose out of nowhere. It was like the desert itself had decided to swallow the ship. The pilot shouted something, but the noise of the wind was louder. The sky turned dark, lightning flashed across the sand, and the ship began to shake violently. Evan grabbed the seat, holding on as alarms blared. The ship lost control and crashed into the dunes. When he woke up, everything was silent. The sky above him was gray, and his body ached. Pieces of metal were scattered all around. The other passengers were gone. Some had escaped, others may be taken by patrols. Evan tried to move, but his leg was hurt. He crawled out of the wreckage, coughing, calling for help. No one answered. The storm had passed, but the sun was cruel. Heat burned his skin and his throat was dry. He knew he wouldn't last long without water. Hours passed. His vision blurred, and his strength began to fade. He whispered to himself, "So this is how it ends." But then through the waves of heat he saw something, a figure moving slowly across the dunes. At first he thought it was a mirage, a trick of his tired eyes. But the figure came closer, and soon he saw her clearly. She was tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like silver under the sun. Her eyes were bright, glowing faintly like sapphires. A long dark robe fluttered behind her as she walked. She looked unlike any alien he had seen before, beautiful and mysterious. She knelt beside him, her face calm and gentle. "You are human," she said softly. Her voice sounded like music carried by the wind. Evan tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He only nodded weakly. The woman looked around, scanning the wreckage, and then lifted him with surprising strength. "You will not die here," she said. She placed a small silver disc on his chest. It released a soft light that eased his pain. He didn't know who she was or why she was helping him, but he could feel the kindness in her touch. She carried him across the dunes toward a cliffside. Hidden beneath it was a narrow entrance to an underground shelter. Inside, the air was cool and filled with the soft hum of old machines. The woman laid him on a bed made of woven fibers and began treating his wounds with glowing salve. Evan looked around and noticed strange objects. Some looked like pieces of Earth's history. An old human book, a small globe, a broken camera. It confused him. Why would an alien have these things? The woman noticed his curiosity. "I am Lysera," she said gently. "This place once belonged to my husband. He believed humans were more than the galaxy claimed them to be." She smiled faintly, but sadness touched her eyes. "He is gone now, but I still keep what he loved." Evan tried to thank her, but his voice trembled. Why did you help me?" Lysera looked at him for a long moment. "Because you reminded me that mercy still exists," she replied. "And perhaps because I am tired of this world's cruelty." She gave him water from a crystal flask. the sweetest thing he had tasted in years. As he rested, she told him about her life. Lysara was once the wife of a famous Orthoran scientist who spoke out against slavery. When he died, the council labeled her as a sympathizer, and she was exiled to the desert. She built this hidden refuge using what was left of her husband's research. Now she lived alone, collecting things from other worlds, especially from Earth. Over the next few days, Evan slowly regained his strength. Lysara visited him often, bringing food and asking him questions about human life. "Is it true," she asked one evening, "that humans love the sound of rain?" Evan smiled faintly. "Yes," he said. "Rain is something you can feel and hear. It makes you remember you're alive." Lysara closed her eyes, as if trying to imagine it. "I would like to feel that one day," she whispered. As time passed, a quiet bond grew between them. She was curious and kind, and he found peace in her company. In that hidden sanctuary, far from the cruelty of the galaxy, they found something rare: understanding. Yet deep down, Evan knew danger was never far away. The galactic patrols would soon search for missing slaves. If they found him there, Lysara could be punished for helping him. Still, for the first time in years, Evan allowed himself to hope. He looked up at the rocky ceiling of the shelter and thought that maybe, just maybe, he had found not only safety, but also a reason to live again. And though he didn't say it aloud, he began to wonder if fate had brought him to her for something greater than survival. Evan woke up the next morning feeling stronger than he had in months. The pain in his leg had faded, replaced by a strange calmness. The underground shelter glowed softly with blue light that came from crystal panels built into the walls. He could hear the sound of flowing air through the vents, gentle and steady like a heartbeat. For the first time in a long while, he felt safe. Lysara was sitting nearby, reading an old Earth book, a collection of poems, worn and yellow. When she noticed him awake, she smiled. "You're healing well, human," she said kindly. "Your name, what is it?" "Evan," he said, his voice rough but steady. "Evan Holt." "Evan," she repeated softly, almost tasting the sound of it. "It is a strong name." She handed him a bowl filled with warm broth that smelled faintly of herbs and something sweet. It wasn't like any food he had known, but it felt comforting. As he ate, he couldn't help but look around the room again. There were many strange items, old artifacts, human and alien both. On one wall hung a cracked mirror. On another stood shelves filled with things from Earth, seashells, old paper maps, even a tiny metal bird that clicked when you wound it. "Why do you have these?" Evan asked finally. "These Earth things." Lysara set her book down. "My husband loved your world," she said. "He used to say humans carry something no other race does, a deep love for small things. He admired how your kind could find beauty even in brokenness." Evan thought about that. It sounded like something his mother once said before the war, that the Earth's magic lived in the details. He looked at Lysara. Her calm face carried both wisdom and sadness. "Your husband," he asked quietly, "what happened to him?" Her eyes lowered. "He died protecting those who could not protect themselves. When he spoke against the slave systems, the council turned on him. They called him a traitor. I was left alone. In this place. They let me live, but they made sure I would never return to the cities." Evan felt a deep ache inside. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Lysara gave a small smile. "Do not be. His spirit is still here, in every sound of the machines he built, in every relic I save. When I saw you in the desert, something in me said he would have wanted me to help." The days slowly blended together in quiet rhythm. Evan began to help around the shelter, fixing old circuits, clearing sand filters, and repairing small drones that Lysara used to gather supplies. He was surprised to see how advanced her technology was, though most of it was rusted and half-working. Together they made it function again. At night they sat under a holographic sky Lysara projected on the ceiling. It was her way of bringing the stars indoors. "I have never seen real stars," she admitted one evening. "Our cities always covered them with smoke." Evan smiled. "On Earth, I used to sit outside my home and look at the stars every night. They made me feel like I belonged to something bigger." She turned her head slightly, her silver hair shining in the light. "Tell me more," she said, and he did. He told her about blue oceans, about the smell of wet soil after rain, about laughter in crowded markets and how children would run through fields chasing fireflies. Lysara listened in silence, eyes glimmering. "You speak of your world like it is alive," she whispered. "It is," Evan said. "Every part of it breathes." From that night, she asked him questions every evening, simple ones, full of wonder. "What is snow? Why do humans plant flowers? Do you miss the sound of the wind?" Evan answered every question, trying to paint Earth with his words. He began to see how deeply she cared, not just about him but about the world he came from. As he recovered, Lysara allowed him to explore more of the sanctuary. It was built like a small underground city, with tunnels, storage rooms, and even a garden chamber filled with glowing plants that could survive without sunlight. "I grow them from seeds traded across galaxies," she said proudly. "Life must always find a way." In that green chamber, Evan found peace. The air smelled faintly of moss and the plants swayed as if they breathed. It reminded him of forests back home. Sometimes he would catch Lysara standing there quietly, her fingers brushing the leaves, eyes closed as though she was praying. But their peace was fragile. One afternoon, as they worked together repairing an old communication screen, a faint alert tone echoed through the base. Lysara frowned and pressed her hand on the control pad. "A patrol signal," she whispered. "The Council's scouts are expanding their search." Evan froze. "They're looking for me?" "Likely," she said calmly. "But they will not find us here, not yet. My husband's designs make this place invisible to scanners. Still, we must be careful." That night, Evan couldn't sleep. He sat near the entrance tunnel, listening to the faint hum of the machines and the distant sound of sand shifting outside. Lysara came to him quietly and sat beside him. The silence between them felt heavy but not uncomfortable. "You shouldn't risk this for me," Evan said after a long pause. "If they find me here, you'll suffer for it." Lysara looked at him with calm eyes. "Suffering for what is right is not the same as losing," she said softly. "You humans believe that love, friendship, and hope are simple emotions. But they are powers, real ones. My husband used to say compassion is the strongest shield in the universe." Evan didn't know how to respond. He only nodded, touched by her words. Days passed into weeks. Their bond grew stronger, not just as savior and survivor, but as two souls who had both lost their worlds. Sometimes, when she worked beside him, their hands brushed and she would pull back slightly, a faint glow crossing her cheeks. Evan felt something stir inside him, a warmth he had long forgotten. It wasn't just gratitude anymore. It was connection. One evening, as the artificial stars shimmered above them, Lysara played an old human song through her console. The tune was rough and crackled with static, but the melody was gentle and sad. "It is called Home," she said. "Your music speaks of longing and light. I listen to it when I feel alone." Evan closed his eyes. "Music is how we remember who we are," he said quietly. Lysara looked at him, and for a moment neither spoke. The air between them was full of something unspoken, a quiet understanding that neither could name yet. Outside, the desert winds whispered against the cliffs, and the machines hummed softly. Beneath that lonely planet's surface, two different hearts began to find rhythm together. They didn't know what the future would bring, but for now, they had found something rare in the endless universe, a small, peaceful corner where kindness still lived. The days of calm in the underground shelter passed like soft ripples in water, but deep down, both Evan and Lysara knew peace on Rithora could never last forever. The galaxy was a restless place, and humans were still hunted for labor or experiments. Evan tried not to think about it, but every time he looked toward the entrance tunnel, he felt the weight of danger waiting outside. One morning, while Evan was working on fixing a broken power core, he heard the sound of metal wings outside, sharp and mechanical like an insect in flight. He stopped immediately. Lysara looked up from her console, her silver eyes narrowing. "A patrol drone," she whispered. They hurried to the monitor. Through the dust-covered lens, they saw a small drone scanning the area above the dunes. Its red sensor lights moved back and forth. It was searching for something or someone. Evan's chest tightened. "They're looking for me again, aren't they?" he asked quietly. "Most likely," Lysara said, her voice calm but serious. "They will not stop until they find proof that a human escaped the camps." She shut off the power grid to hide their energy signals, and for a moment, the lights dimmed. The shelter fell into silence. Only the soft hum of life support machines remained. They waited. Minutes passed, slow and tense. Finally, the drone turned away and disappeared over the dunes. Lysara exhaled softly. For now, we are safe. But Evan could see the concern in her eyes. The danger wasn't gone. It had only passed them by for now. Later that night, while they shared a simple meal in the garden chamber, Evan noticed how quiet Lysara had become. She was usually full of curiosity and questions, but tonight she barely spoke. "You're worried," he said softly. She looked at him with gentle sadness. "The council has become stricter. They believe mercy is weakness. I hear their broadcasts sometimes about new inspections, new laws. If they ever find you here, they will not forgive me." Evan lowered his eyes. "Then I should leave," he said slowly. "I've healed enough. Maybe I can find another place to hide." Lysara shook her head. "You will not survive out there. The desert is wide and the patrols are everywhere. You would only walk toward death." He stayed quiet. Deep inside, he hated that she was right. He had seen the endless dunes. He knew what the heat could do to a human body. Still, he couldn't bear the thought of her being punished because of him. The next day, Lysara left the shelter for the first time in weeks. She told Evan she needed to gather more supplies from an old trade post deep in the canyon. "Stay inside," she told him firmly. "If you hear anything unusual, go to the lower tunnel and wait." Evan watched her disappear into the bright desert light. Hours passed. He worked on repairs to keep himself busy, but his mind kept drifting back to her. When she finally returned, the faint glow around her skin looked dull and her steps were heavy. "They know," she said simply as she entered. Evan froze. "Who knows?" "The outer patrols," she said, setting down a metal crate. "Someone saw me buy human medicine. They questioned why I would need such things. I told them it was for old research records, but their eyes were suspicious. We have little time now." Evan felt a chill run through him. "Then what do we do?" She walked toward a hidden wall panel and pressed her hand against it. The wall slid open to reveal a small corridor lined with silver lights. "There is a route that leads to the border zone, Sector 9, she said. "It is far, but if we can reach it, you may find transport back to the human territories." "You mean, you're coming with me?" he asked. Lysara hesitated. "If I stay, they will question me. If I go, at least I can protect you until you are free." Evan wanted to argue, but the truth was he didn't want to leave her behind either. So they began preparing for the journey. They packed food capsules, water cells, and a map device that showed the old routes beneath the dunes. Lysara carried a scanner that could sense patrol signals before they got too close. That night before they left, Evan walked into the garden chamber one last time. The glowing plants swayed softly, their light reflecting in his eyes. He touched one of the leaves and whispered, "Thank you." It wasn't just a place to him anymore. It was home. Lysara stood at the doorway watching him. "You've grown attached," she said softly. "How could I not?" he replied. "This place, you gave me hope again," she smiled faintly. "Hope is the hardest thing to keep alive in this galaxy. But perhaps it is also the most powerful." They left before dawn. The desert stretched out endlessly under a pale sky. Lysara led the way with sure steps, her robe fluttering in the wind. Evan followed close behind, carrying a small pack. Every few hours they stopped in the shadows of broken stone towers that dotted the dunes. During one of their stops, Evan asked, "Do you ever regret saving me?" Lysara looked toward the horizon. "No," she said softly. "Every choice leaves a mark on time. Some bring pain, others bring meaning. Saving you gave my loneliness purpose." Her words sank deep into his heart. They continued walking side by side through the shifting sands. At night, they camped in the ruins of an ancient Rathoran outpost. Evan fixed an old solar heater while Lysara scanned the skies for drones. Above them, the stars shimmered faintly through the dusty air. As they sat by the small heater, Evan said, "On Earth, people used to say stars were stories written in light. Every one of them told of someone's journey." Lysara smiled gently. "Then perhaps tonight the stars tell ours." For a while there was silence. Just the sound of the wind brushing across the dunes. The bond between them grew stronger with every step of their journey. It was built not on words but on trust and quiet care. Two beings from different worlds finding comfort in each other's presence. But danger was still close. On the third day, as they approached the border hills, The scanner on Lysera's wrist began to beep softly. "Patrols," she said. "3 of them. We must move faster." They pressed on, following a narrow ravine that curved between cliffs. The path was hard and the air was thin, but they didn't stop. Evan could feel his heartbeat racing. He wasn't afraid for himself anymore. He was afraid for her. Finally, as night fell, they reached the edge of a vast metallic wall that shimmered faintly with blue energy. Beyond it lay the boundary of Sector 9, the only route toward freedom. Evan looked at it in awe and fear. "That's it?" he whispered. Lysara nodded. "Yes, but the wall is guarded. We must wait until the patrols change shift." They hid among the rocks, watching the lights move in patterns. Evan glanced at Lysara. Her face was calm but focused, her silver eyes glowing softly in the dark. "You've risked everything for me," he said quietly. "Why?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because you remind me that even in a broken universe, kindness still matters. And because—" She paused, her voice softer now. "Because I believe in you." Evan had no words. The desert wind blew gently between them, carrying the quiet truth of her heart. They waited in silence, ready for what lay ahead. Beyond the glowing wall, freedom waited, but it would not come easily. Still, for the first time, Evan felt he wasn't just running away from something. He was running toward something, something that had the warmth of hope and perhaps even the beginnings of love. The wall of Sector 9 stretched before them like a river of light. It was made of energy and sound, glowing faintly blue against the endless desert night. Beyond that wall lay freedom, Evan's only chance to reach human territory again. But between them and that freedom stood the laws of a galaxy that saw him as less than life. Lysara crouched beside him behind a boulder, studying the glowing surface. "The barrier runs on layered frequencies," she whispered. "It can only be opened by codes from the Galactic Council's system. My husband once worked for them. He had access." Evan looked at her with hope flickering in his tired eyes. "Do you still have his codes?" She hesitated, her silver fingers brushing over a small crystal pendant she wore around her neck. "Yes, but using them will alert the Council immediately. The moment the gate opens, they'll know someone broke the security grid." Evan's heart sank. "Then it's a trap either way." "Not a trap," she said softly. "A choice." The wind howled softly across the sand, carrying the faint hum of distant engines. Somewhere out there, patrols were moving closer. Time was slipping away. Lysara turned to him. "When I open it, you must run," she said firmly. "The path will stay clear for only a few minutes. Once you're through, follow the beacon on your wristband. It will lead you to a transport outpost. Do not stop, no matter what happens." Evan frowned. "You're speaking as if you won't be coming with me." "I can't," she said, her voice steady but low. "Once the system recognizes my husband's identity code, it will also recognize that I used it. They will trace the signal here. If I go through the gate, I'll bring the patrols right to you." Evan shook his head. "No, I won't leave you behind. Not after everything you've done for me." Lysara smiled faintly, her eyes full of light and sadness. "Evan, you must live. You have stories to tell, about your people, about Earth, about the beauty your kind still remembers. I am already known here. My life is not the one they need to hear about." She reached out and touched his arm gently. Her skin felt cool and smooth, almost metallic, but her touch was full of warmth. "You once told me that humans see stars as stories written in light," she said softly. "Then let me be one of those stars, a small story that helped another find his way." He felt his throat tighten, but before he could speak, she pressed a small silver ring into his hand. "My husband made this for me," she whispered. "Keep it. It will remind you that kindness survives even when the universe forgets it." Evan looked at the ring shining in the starlight, then at her face, calm, brave, and heartbreakingly beautiful. "Lysara, please," he said quietly. "Come with me," but she shook her head. "I have already crossed my destiny, Evan. You still have yours ahead." The night grew colder as the two stood together before the great wall. The blue glow reflected in her eyes, and for a moment, everything felt still. Two souls from different worlds standing on the edge of time. Finally, she placed her hand on a small control pad near the base of the wall. Symbols appeared, glowing faintly in the air. She entered a sequence of ancient codes. The air trembled. The wall's energy began to ripple like water touched by wind. A narrow path of light opened through the barrier. "Go," Lysara whispered urgently. Now, Evan didn't move. His heart was torn between reason and emotion. He looked at her one last time. "Thank you," he said. "For saving me. For believing in me." Lysara smiled, a small tear shining like crystal at the corner of her eye. "Live well, Evan Holt. And when you look at the sky, think of me." Before he could say anything else, the air around them began to vibrate. Warning sirens echoed faintly in the distance. The system had detected the intrusion. Lysara turned and pushed him forward. "Run!" she said, her voice steady but full of urgency. Evan stepped through the light. The barrier rippled around him like warm air, and for a moment he felt weightless. When he looked back, Lysara was standing on the other side, her robe fluttering in the wind, her silver form glowing against the blue light. Then the wall sealed shut behind him. He fell to his knees on the other side, breathing hard. The desert stretched ahead, vast and open, but all he could think about was the woman he had just left behind. The faint sound of engines grew louder behind the wall. He wanted to turn back, to find her, but her last words echoed in his mind. "Live well." He forced himself to move. He followed the beacon on his wristband, the small light blinking steadily. Each step felt heavy, like walking through memories. He thought about the nights they spent talking, the music she played, her fascination with rain, her laughter when she learned about Earth's oceans. Hours later, just before dawn, he reached the edge of the desert where an old transport hub stood hidden beneath the rocks. A group of traders waited there, ready to leave for neutral space. Evan climbed aboard quietly, his clothes covered in sand, his mind still on Lysara. As the ship rose into the sky, he looked through the small window. The desert below shimmered in the morning light. Somewhere under that endless sea of sand was the woman who had changed his life. He pressed his hand against the glass and whispered, "I'll never forget you." Back on the other side of the wall, Lysara stood alone as the patrol lights approached. The council guards surrounded her, their scanners flashing. She didn't resist. She looked up at the rising sun, her expression peaceful. She had done what she set out to do. Somewhere beyond that light, a human heart was free again. When they asked her name, she simply said, "Lysara of Rithora, widow of the scientist Varen, protector of life." They led her away, but she kept her head high. She had lived by her heart, not by fear. And in that quiet moment between dawn and day, something unseen moved through the universe, a thread of kindness that connected two distant souls. It carried across the stars, whispering that love and mercy were not weaknesses but the strongest forces of all. Evan didn't see her again, but her memory stayed alive in every corner of his thoughts. He wore the silver ring on a chain around his neck, close to his heart. To him, it wasn't just a memory of rescue. It was proof that even in a galaxy built on control and fear, compassion could still rewrite destiny. That day, as the ship flew away from Rithora, Evan looked out at the stars and finally understood what Lysara had meant. Some stars didn't just shine, they remembered, and she was one of them. Years passed since that night under the blue wall of light. Time had softened many wounds, but not all. For Evan Holt, every sunrise still carried a memory of the woman who had saved him, the alien widow who taught him that compassion could be stronger than any weapon. After the rescue, the human colonies took months to fully trust him. Many didn't believe his story. "An alien saved you?" they asked, their voices full of disbelief. Why would she risk her life for a human? Evan never argued. He only smiled faintly and said, "Because she believed kindness is the truest language in the universe." He started a quiet life on the restored Earth, working as an engineer again. The world was slowly healing after decades of war. The cities were rebuilding, the skies were blue again, and the sound of laughter had returned to the streets. But even in that peace, Evan often found himself looking up at the stars, wondering which one might shine over Rithora. He lived in a small house near the ocean. It was simple, filled with old books, small plants, and fragments of technology he repaired in his spare time. On his desk sat a single object, a silver ring on a chain glowing faintly under the sunlight. He wore it every day close to his heart. It was all that remained of Lysara. At night, when the sea wind touched his window, Evan would close his eyes and remember her voice, the calm strength in her tone, the curiosity in her questions, the warmth in her words when she said, "Live well, Evan Holt." Years later, when the new Earth Council began rebuilding connections with other species, Evan offered to work with them. His experiences made him a bridge between worlds. He believed that if humans and aliens could learn to understand each other, maybe they could avoid another war. During a grand conference held in the rebuilt city of Geneva, he stood before thousands of delegates from different planets. The hall glowed with lights and symbols of peace. When it was his turn to speak, Evan walked to the podium, his hands steady, his heart full. He didn't read from any notes. He simply began to tell a story, his story. He spoke of the harsh deserts of Rithora, of slavery and survival, and of the day a silver-skinned widow had carried him out of the dunes. He told them about the underground shelter filled with relics of Earth, about her love for human stories, and how she taught him that compassion could cross galaxies. She risked everything to save one life, he said softly, his voice echoing across the hall. Not because I was human, not because she wanted a reward, but because she believed mercy is the highest form of intelligence. She showed me that our worlds are not so different. We all search for belonging, for connection, for meaning. The audience listened in silence. Some had tears in their eyes. Others bowed their heads in respect. When he finished, the room filled with quiet applause, not loud or forced, but sincere, the kind that comes from hearts moved by truth. From that day forward, his story became a symbol of unity. Schools taught it to children. The words "love is the most advanced form of science," a line Lysera's husband once spoke, were written on the walls of new academies across the colonies. Evan became a voice for peace, but he never sought fame. He preferred to live simply, planting trees, teaching young engineers, and sharing small stories about kindness and trust. He often said, "We can build better machines, but only hearts can build a better universe." One evening, many years later, he sat by the ocean watching the sunset. The water shimmered with gold and orange light, and the wind was gentle. He held the silver ring between his fingers and smiled. "Lysera," he whispered, "you would have loved this. The light here changes every minute. It's never the same twice, just like you said about the stars." He thought of her then, not as an alien or a rescuer, but as a friend, a teacher, and the bridge between two worlds. He imagined her walking through her garden chamber again, touching the glowing leaves, her eyes filled with quiet wonder. A soft sound pulled him from his thoughts. A young girl stood nearby, holding a small mechanical bird. "Mr. Holt," she said shyly, "it's broken again. Can you fix it?" He smiled kindly. "Of course." She handed it to him, and he carefully adjusted the gears until the tiny wings fluttered again. The girl's eyes lit up with joy. "Thank you," she said, running off. Evan watched her go, a gentle warmth filling his chest. Moments like that reminded him why he still worked, why he still told his story. Kindness could travel farther than light. It could reach across time. That night, as stars filled the sky, Evan opened his old notebook and began to write something new. It wasn't a report or a speech. It was a message, simple, honest, and meant for anyone who would one day find it. He wrote, "Once I met someone from another world. She was nothing like me, yet everything I hoped humanity could be. Gentle, curious, brave. She saved me when I had nothing left, and in doing so, she saved the part of me that still believed in good. Her name was Lysera. If you ever wonder what makes life worth living, remember her truth. Love what is small, protect what is fragile, and never stop believing that mercy is strength." He closed the notebook and placed it beside the ring. Then he leaned back in his chair, gazing out the window at the sky filled with stars. A soft smile curved his lips. Somewhere out there, beyond galaxies and councils, beyond war and memory, he believed she could still see him. And maybe, just maybe, she smiled back. In the years that followed, his message spread across human and alien worlds alike. It became known as the Lysera Principle, the belief that compassion is the bridge between species. Scientists quoted it, artists painted it, pilots whispered it before traveling to unknown stars. Even after Evan Holt's time passed, the story lived on. Statues of Lysera and Evan were built in the gardens of peace on Earth and Rithora. One inscription read, "She taught him mercy." He carried her memory. Together they changed the universe, and every night, under the starlit sky, when the ocean's waves touched the shore, it almost sounded like a whisper, soft, kind, eternal, reminding the world that love once given never truly fades.